Welcome to Age of the Geek, where we dive into TV and film and take a look at these projects through nerd vision goggles. We are your hosts. I'm Quiggs, and this is Dave.
Hello there.
So this week we are talking, finally, about The Boys Season 3 from Amazon Prime. Dave, what were your thoughts on this season?
So, non-spoilers to start. I liked the season overall. I really liked it. I thought that they did a great job with certain elements. I think a lot of the characters are really, really well written. They have really interesting arcs. There's a couple standouts for me. I think Starlight is probably my favorite character, but there's also some things that I could do without.
And we talked a little bit about that when we were preparing for this.
I think my biggest issue with this show is there are times where they're so gory, so brutal, and I don't feel that it necessarily serves the story. It's just there to shock the audience.
I agree with you. I feel like they were chasing that shock and disgust value far more than developing their characters and advancing the story more, which they did a little bit, but not to the degree I think they could have. And even their marketing for the season was all about how this is going to be the goriest season ever. And it seemed like they were focusing on the wrong thing because I agree with you. I think they have fantastic characters.
The actors are amazing, and honestly, I think there's some really interesting story arcs, character arcs, that they told this season. I think there was an interesting story that they were telling. I don't think it suffered in storytelling or character portrayal. I think there's just moments where they're just like, how gross can we make this? And they turn that dial up to 11 for the sake of gore and shock and not for the sake of the characters. I'm going to assume if you're listening to this, you've watched seasons 1, 2. And you think back to season 1, A-Train runs through Hughie's fiance, girlfriend, I forget.
Girlfriend Robin.
Yeah, he runs through her. And that was disgusting and shocking. But it was a major character moment, right? The shock and disgust played in to who the character was and the motivation for the main, if not the main character of the whole series. And what I found in this season was that although they had great character arcs and great storytelling, the gross factor did not directly link to the character arc and the storytelling. And so it just was too much for me.
I think there's one point I slightly disagree with you on, and that's the character arcs. While I think some of the characters did have great arcs, I also feel like they were circular. Less arcs and more just circles or U-turns. Some of them had some growth and development, even in between seasons, but I feel like they took a few steps back, and we almost are going to start season 4 off with them in a similar place as to where they were in season 3, or maybe even season 2. The way that they were advertising, besides just the shock and disgust factor, was building up this whole confrontation between Soldier Boy, Homelander, and the boys, maybe even bringing the whole thing to a close. And so I really thought this was going to be the last season. I didn't expect them to. It wasn't the strongest season to me for the boys. I liked season 2 a heck of a lot better than season 3. Even though there were some parts in season 3 I really liked, I think overall I liked 2 a little bit better. Do you want to give us our synopsis?
Sure. The boys have gone legit. Now working for the government to put away any soups that have gotten out of hand, it appears everything has come together for Hughie and the rest of the boys. But that is thrown into turmoil as Hughie learns that their boss, Newman, is the soup who can explode people's heads. The boys decide enough is enough and are going to find a way to kill Homelander. They try and determine what killed Soldier Boy, as they believe that is their best chance to take out Homelander. The boys travel to Russia, hoping to find answers, and instead find a living Soldier Boy, now with a new ability to expel radioactive energy, which removes Soup's powers. Hughie and Butcher go rogue, using a drug called V24 to gain temporary superpowers, and team up with Soldier Boy to kill Homelander in return, helping him kill his former teammates who betrayed him. Meanwhile, Homelander continues to lose his cool, and his aggressive rhetoric resonates with some, which encourages him to grow more unstable. Starlight also has decided to no longer play by Vaught's rules and is pushing to do what is right. All this culminates in a final conflict with Soldier Boy versus Butcher and Starlight, while Queen Maeve and Homelander fight it out. Soldier Boy begins to explode, and Queen Maeve tackles him out the window, causing the explosion to only affect her. At the end, Maeve goes into hiding, powerless, and Homelander kills a man in public, completely unhinged. I think there's a couple characters that kind of have these B plots going on that don't play into the major thing happening. I think that's the Deep and A Train each have their kind of own story happening.
Yeah, so A Train ended the season really weird, but he started the season kind of getting tired of Vaught's crap.
Yeah, I really liked A Train's little B plot a lot because it could have easily been like the company itself just wants to utilize A Train to appeal to the African American demographic. But no, A Train himself is kind of like, I don't really care about my roots. I'm just going to manipulate it however I can to make money and stay relevant. It kind of pushes the theme that all these people suck. When it comes to the superheroes, it's not about their race or belief system. It's really they all suck. A Train doesn't care about his roots. He doesn't care about the people and community he came from. He really just cares about staying relevant and making money, and he'll make use of his own ethnicity
Right.
if that is what will get him money and popularity. In the beginning of the season, he's like, yeah, we're going to have this video game, Roots. And, all the people in the room, the guy who was presenting with him even told him, like, no one believes you. No one believes that you care. By the end of the season, I think he does care in his own twisted way. And I feel like I don't think there is yet, but some amount of redemption for his character.
Oh yeah, more so than in any season, even though he still does some shady crap. You caught glimpses of this in the first couple seasons of he's spineless, but he also doesn't really abide 100% by what Vought is doing. He looks a little uncomfortable. And then season 2 happens and he's even a little bit more uncomfortable. And then season 3 happens and he's legitimately shirking what they're telling him to do because he doesn't abide by that anymore. And then you see this change in him when Hughie finally confronts him and he apologizes to Hughie, which doesn't mean anything to Hughie at this point. I mean, an apology doesn't bring a person back from the dead, but that was a significant turning point for A Train, I think.
He's on this tipping point. He finally truly realizes how terrible he has been, how much pain and suffering has been caused by him, partially because it kind of hit home when that very racist hero
Blue Hawk
paralyzed his brother, and I'm assuming killed at least one person in that room because it definitely looked that way. He has not done enough to make amends, right? Just saying I'm sorry, even if it was heartfelt, is not enough for the terrible crimes he has committed. But I could see him pushing over the edge and doing something truly honorable to make up for everything he did. I think he's kind of got to do something really big to do that, risking his life or sacrificing himself in some way. For true redemption, he needs to do something truly selfless.
One of the most interesting things that happened to A Train this season, besides him apologizing to Hughie, was getting Blue Hawk, the racist superhero's heart transplanted into him, and how much that shook him.
That was a really interesting turn. I think they did a lot this season to make his character a lot more interesting. I don't remember really caring about A Train in season 2.
He was depowered because of all that V that he did. He had been depowered and was essentially useless and then spineless because of that. He was defenseless and he knew it.
Yeah, well, he was mostly depowered in this season as well. The difference is they actually gave him interesting story beats. I hope that we see in season 4 some more in that direction.
Oh, they definitely set up some interesting things for him to do.
Yeah, I mean, he's got his speed back.
So the Deep, on the other hand,
the Deep is the comic relief. He has no true character arc because all he does is pander to Homelander and try and do whatever he can to climb the ladder. Honestly, I thought his character moments in seasons 1 and 2 were probably funnier. I didn't really laugh that much at this one. I mean, the main joke with the Deep in this season was he wants to have sex with an octopus. They play that joke multiple times. I thought it was kind of funny, maybe the first time in kind of a gross way, but it came up in multiple episodes and I was just like, this is so weird. Why is this constantly what you're bringing up? He doesn't really play into the major story. His character arc doesn't really say anything deep, right? He's the comic relief. All of his parts are played as the comic relief, but all of the jokes are mainly surrounding he wants to have sex with sea creatures. Comedy's is subjective. You know, some people might have found it funny every time. I could have done without the Deep in this season, to be honest.
Yeah. So the one scene that I thought was really well done with the Deep was when they had the seafood lunch
Yeah, oh.
and Homelander forced the Deep to eat his octopus friend. The part that made me laugh was he's forced to eat the octopus and picks him up and goes to put him in his mouth. He goes, "Oh my gosh, he's praying." It was so gross. The fact that he could hear the octopus's thoughts is kind of funny to me, but in a very gross way as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very macabre humor, very dark humor. I thought that was an interesting scene for sure. I thought the Deep was so funny in the first season after, he gets kicked out of the Seven and his weird, depressed sea adventures and the whole thing with the swordfish. I laughed so hard, all this stuff with the Deep in the first season. This season, I don't know. It wasn't as funny to me. I don't know why.
All of the boys had somewhat circular arcs this season in a strange way. They had some growth, but at the same time took some steps back. And Frenchie and Butcher were both said at the beginning of the season to have been sober for months. But by the end of the season, they're both back on those things. And whatever growth that they had had from the last season that drove them off of those vices, it felt to me that they came full circle and now they're just back on them again.
I think Frenchie was kind of underserved this season. None of it stood out in my mind, you know?
He was essentially just used to introduce Nina.
So they could get to Russia.
Yeah.
I like Frenchie, and I don't feel like he was really used well. He didn't have an arc. He basically just goes back into drug use and then kind of stops at the end, I guess. I thought Mother's Milk had a much more interesting character story because a lot of it dealt with him and his family.
Mother's Milk definitely had a much more interesting story. But before we go on to him, I feel like Frenchie and Kimiko go hand in hand because they were going to try and get out.
I think Kimiko did have a really great story, actually, because she starts the season, and she has, in previous seasons, hated her powers. She hated the fact that she was a soup. She just wanted to go back to a simple life with her brother, and she can't do that. And she blames the fact that she was given these powers, and she thinks the powers are evil. And then the whole arc of her losing her powers and then wanting them back because she realizes that it's not really the powers that make any of these people evil. It's what they do with their powers, how they use that power to live their lives. And so although physically I don't think a whole lot changed, right? She started with powers and she lost her powers and realized that she wanted them. That's on the surface. I think underneath that, she really did grow a lot as a character because she has accepted who she is, where I don't think she did that before.
They also have this theme throughout the show, and Butcher says this multiple times, and other characters say it multiple times, that all the V does is enhance how crappy a person is, or enhance the traits of a person. So if they're crazy, they're going to be super crazy. In the comics, the V that is given to Kimiko, whose name in the comics is the female, makes her like some crazy bloodthirsty animal. And she is super violent and wants to kill people. That's what the V brings out in her. So despite what she thinks that the V isn't what makes her bloodthirsty, I think it is because...
Well, I don't think you can go off the comics. The comics are one thing. I don't think you can use comic logic here.
Because it is a different thing from the comics, but I do have something to back it up. So before she loses her V, every time she is in combat, she seems to enjoy it. But then afterwards, she kind of has that guilt about what she did and how violent she was. But then she loses her powers, wants to get them back, and then once Starlight steals the V for her and she gets it, that last fight scene when she's taken out the military units so that Frenchie can create the gas for Soldier Boy, she seems to really enjoy herself again. So I think there is just a little bit of that bleed out from the comics there.
Maybe. I never really read it that way. I think that her upset nature when she kills the people without her powers is her realizing it wasn't her powers, it was her. And I think the reason that she's so happy go lucky at the end, where she's taking out those soldiers, is because she's accepted who she is. I think it's more an internal struggle externalized through storytelling than it is any indication of what the drug does.
Having had all of the talk about how the drug just enhances who and what you are, one of them's got to be wrong. So either the drug makes you an enhanced version of what you already are, or you just are crappy and you just now have superpowers. I don't know. One or the other has to be true. And I'm based on what I saw and how I interpreted that, I would probably have to say for me, I would agree with Butcher and Maeve, and I can't remember who else says it in the show, but I would agree with them that I think the drug does enhance someone's traits, all of their traits. Not only does it give them powers, but I think it enhances their personality. So whether or not Kimiko is an outlier of that, I guess remains to be seen. But I did feel that they were used mostly as a stepping stone to Soldier Boy.
Yeah, I could see that. I will say with Kimiko, unlike The Deep, who I didn't really find funny this season, the whole musical interludes with Kimiko, I loved.
It was so off the wall. I didn't expect it.
I absolutely loved all the musical interludes, and they start really subtle in the first episode. And you're kind of shocked because she talks, right? She just starts singing when that girl's playing the piano, and then you realize it's in her mind. But then, like, you get a full blown musical number later on, and I loved all the musical numbers with Kimiko. The musical numbers were just a fun breather from a usually disturbing show.
No, you're right. It was a nice break from the craziness.
Yeah, so I thought Mother's Milk's story was really interesting. It was all about his relationship to his father and his grandfather and his family's history and his relationship to his daughter. And he thinks protecting her is to not allow her to be aware of the dark history of his family and what happened to his father and what happened to his grandfather and why he hates soup so much. And I think it was nice by the end seeing him open up to her and everything. It was a very short arc, but I thought it hit well.
The only thing that I feel like they underutilized was he did not get closure. And I hope he does in season 4, because they do show at the end of the season he's still dealing with his OCD and some of his trauma because he didn't get that closure with Soldier Boy. I vibe with Mother's Milk because he's trying to be a good dad.
Mm-hmm.
And while they play the trope of I am a hero and I need to protect those that I love from the things I do, they play that trope off with him, but they do it in a way that, I don't know, it clicks so much more with me on a parental level.
A lot of times, the way the writing is makes you believe that keeping secrets is the right way, right? Like, look at Spider Man No Way Home. At the end of the movie is telling you that Peter Parker is doing the right thing, not reminding his friends who he is. Maybe in the next one, we will get a referendum on that. But I kind of read it as the story is telling you he's doing the right thing here. In Mother's Milk's case, what the story tells you is the right thing is tell the truth, right? You're not protecting the person you love by keeping the secret. You're hurting them and you're confusing them. At the end of season 2, he decides to go and live with his daughter and spend more time with his daughter and be a family man, but he still is hiding so much that it just builds up in him. He can't truly be there because he's not being honest. But in this, he is honest and he tells his daughter, this is what happened to your grandfather. This is what happened to your great grandfather. And this is how it affected me.
When I was thinking about and writing notes for this episode, My first thoughts about MM was, why does he think he can square up against Soldier Boy or Homelander or a souped up Butcher?
It was beyond blind rage to me. It was like, dude, what are you doing? You're literally just gonna die.
Right. He shoots at Butcher, who's souped up, and then bullets have no effect, so he throws down the empty gun after he and then puts up his fists. I'm thinking to myself, and Butcher even said it, what do you think you're doing, man? I had hoped that they were not going to kill him off because that to me felt like a suicidal move. And I thought Mother's Milk is one of my favorite characters. And I hope they don't kill him off because he is, in many ways, the heart of the boys. He's trying to stop them from crossing a line. He is reminding them that, hey, we do this because we have morals and ethics that we are trying to uphold. We can't be the bad guys. Him struggling with that while also struggling with not replicating those morals and ethics when interacting with his own family is an interesting dynamic that they played off pretty decently well, I think, in this season. You can see that when his daughter's stepdad took her to a Homelander rally.
And what a garbage human being that guy is.
Oh my gosh, dude, for real. But he starts yelling at Mother's Milk, and MM just punches him out. I wanted to cheer a little bit at that, even though I knew it was wrong, and he knew it was wrong right away too, because his daughter saw it. You could see him kind of groan and cringe, and he knew then that everything was just crossing line. And I think the next scene with him after that is him talking to his daughter about everything and just opening up to her. And if he had just done that before, maybe that punch out wouldn't have had to happen. But honestly, I hope that that's the worst that ever happens to that stepdad.
That guy is garbage. At the end, when Homelander just kills the dude right at the rally, and he just starts cheering.
Oh, I forgot that was him. Yeah, he's the guy that starts everyone cheering.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, he's just a garbage person.
It didn't make sense to me that MM's wife, who must have known how he felt about superheroes, would get together with some milquetoast guy like that.
I don't know. Sometimes you just don't know people until certain things bring it out. The actor does a good job because I hate him. I hate him so much.
Yeah, oh, because you love to hate him. Yeah, exactly. So I have a theory about MM, and I don't think this will ever come to fruition. But there is a moment when him, Hughie, and Butcher are getting ready for a mission, and Butcher and Hughie are shooting up some Temp V, and he offers the Temp V to MM. And for a split second, you can see MM almost consider it. But then he says no and goes back to his, we don't cross that line. My theory is that MM might already have some powers because, number one, in the comics, Mother's Milk grows up with powers. He is super strong in the comics. That's actually how he gets his nickname Mother's Milk, because he needs his mother's milk to survive.
That sounds super weird.
It is super weird. But the two things that make me think that he might already have a little bit of powers is, number one, he didn't take the Temp V, probably because he wasn't sure how it would affect him. Number two, why else would he attempt to even throw down with a superpowered Butcher or a Soldier Boy if he didn't have some sort of protection? Because knowing Mother's Milk and how OCD he is and how calculated he is with things, in the past couple seasons, having witnessed that, it did not make sense to me at all that he would be doing that. Like you said, it goes beyond the stupidity of blind rage. And so those two things make me think he might have some sort of super ability, although I kind of doubt they're going to go in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, you have convinced me to consider it. You started out and I was like, no way. But, by the end I was thinking, okay, maybe. I still don't believe it, but maybe.
No, I doubt they're going to go in that direction. I feel like they already would have, but kind of secretly wishing for that in season 4. That would be a huge twist reveal.
Yeah, we'll see. Queen Maeve, I thought she is working with Butcher. She is completely sober and just building herself up to fight Homelander. And man, does that pay off in the end. Yeah, she was awesome.
Queen Maeve became one of my favorite characters this season.
She was great. And the actress did an amazing job.
She was one of the only ones in this season that I felt had an arc that didn't make a U-turn. She started at one place and kept progressing. She had this one track goal of taking out Homelander. But at the end of the season, her morals or ethics had changed just a little bit and she ended up sacrificing herself.
I thought her arc was amazing, and it wasn't like a major part of the show in the season, but every moment with her really paid off, and it really was great to see her fight Homelander in the end and go toe to toe with him. He obviously was better, but she was holding her own. Even after she got her eye poked out, she was still holding her own and definitely got some licks in herself. He was bleeding. We haven't really seen him bleed before.
I was so thrilled to see that payoff because this is a show that likes to turn expectations upside down. And I half expected her to get blown away in the first 30 seconds of that fight.
What was great about it too, right? Because we talked about before how A Train, he has realized where he stands. And he still has been just doing what is best for him, getting revenge. And Queen Maeve, even though her fighting Homelander was really about revenge to her, I think she had a little bit more noble aspirations than A Train has, but I still think it was mainly a personal issue. It was mainly about revenge. And so for her to give up her revenge to do what is right to save people, I thought was really cool.
The only thing that confuses me, we see a couple times where we see Soldier Boy blast people with his chest ray and completely incinerate them, or at least burn them to a crisp. And they play off that last scene as if he's about to explode uncontrollably and it's going to be way worse than the normal concentrated ray. But somehow he and Maeve survive. And she also makes a mention in the first season during the airplane incident that she can't fly, and if she were to jump out, she would get either significantly hurt or die. So she jumps from the tallest building in the city, gets caught in the radiation blast from Soldier Boy, and somehow survives. It didn't make sense to me. Like I said, I'm not unhappy about it because I like her character so much this season, but it didn't make sense to me.
I think as far as surviving the explosion, I think it was just to show how powerful Maeve was. Like, she wasn't Homelander, but she was more powerful than all those other garden variety heroes that he had killed previously in the season, especially with her training and everything. Only a handful of heroes probably could have survived that, and she's one of them. That's kind of how I read it. Homelander would have survived, and probably Ryan would have survived.
That's a fair point. That's something I hadn't considered. Speaking about one of the best heroes, Black Noir.
Noir has just basically been there previous seasons. Obviously, he's supposed to be the Batman character, kind of, but he doesn't have any of Batman's real traits. He's just stealthy and in black. And he literally never talks, which they now explain why. But I thought he had a really interesting character, played super well into what happened with Soldier Boy, and the way that they explain the history of what happened with the cartoons, I thought was so cool. I could see people not liking it, but I really liked that.
It was a trippy kind of Deadpool way that they did that, and I liked it. It played into the whole heroes with trauma thing that they were pulling this season with multiple different characters. It was funny to me that this all happened in that world's version of a Chuck E. Cheese. It was interesting to get more backstory on Noir finally. And I was hoping for more. Now, Kripke has said that in season 4, Black Noir is coming back, but not in the way we expect. And I suspect that it's going to be just some random other soup in his suit, which is going to be annoying. Honestly, that was actually surprising to me because they really played up the whole Noir being the only one that Homelander can trust. And I don't know if you've seen Diabolical, the Boys spinoff. And there's an episode where it's Homelander. He's known as the Homelander when he first starts out. And it's one of his first missions in public after debuting for Vought. Right when he starts off, they pair Black Noir with him because of numbers and popularity ratings. And he kind of feels like Black Noir is kind of hoarding in on his action. So he goes off on his own and starts botching a mission and accidentally kills hostages that these bad guys are taking over and starts brutally killing the bad guys as well. So Black Noir kind of steps in and they fight briefly until Homelander realizes that Black Noir is actually trying to help him when he kills a hostage that's going to run and tell the media what's really going on. Then he has more of a respect for Black Noir and vice versa. And I think that's where that storyline of him telling Black Noir multiple times this season, "You're the only one I can trust."
It didn't surprise me at all because Homelander is completely nuts.
It seems every season he's cascading further and further into insanity, which is saying something considering that character. But I feel like killing Black Noir was one of those tipping points because he truly felt like he had no one.
Let's talk about Soldier Boy. Jensen Ackles is the main reason I watched season 3. Although I think the show is very good, it's very well made. I really like the writing and everything. It's just a little much for me at times, and I can't watch it sometimes. And so I was kind of done after season 2. I was like, I don't feel like I need to keep watching this. Then I heard that Jensen Ackles is going to be in, and I'm a fan of Jensen Ackles. So I was like, you know what? I'll give it one more shot. And I really liked Jensen Ackles' performance. Soldier Boy sucks.
I have to say, I was right there with you, totally on the fence, because they started portraying the third season as even more gross and more shocking and more disturbing than before. And I said, you know what? I might pass. And then they said, Jensen Ackles is Soldier Boy. And curiosity piqued because this looks like a role that I'm not used to seeing Jensen Ackles in. And he did a great job, really making me kind of hate him.
He had a really interesting story, being betrayed by his team and now trying to get revenge. And he keeps having all these PTSD moments when he has these attacks. He basically explodes and kills everybody around him, unless they're super powered enough to survive, and then they just lose their powers. It's another Homelander. Soldier Boy plays this more old-fashioned monster of a human being. He's definitely very much based on a very toxic father from the 50s or something, where Homelander is a more modern version of that.
He's basically Captain America, but if Captain America was a sexist, junky piece of trash. I don't know if they expected us to still be shocked by things like this, but I feel like they tried to play up, Soldier Boy, great American hero, and then you meet him and you're like, they kind of say, oh, just kidding, he's actually a piece of garbage like all the other soups. And I felt like they tried to play that shock off again when they first meet him, but I felt like it was wasted. But I feel like we've been desensitized to that now. We know all soups are garbage.
For sure. They definitely played it up too much. They want you to think he's good. You know he's not going to be. He's going to be a garbage human being like all the other superheroes. They're all garbage human beings, besides Starlight.
Right. She's the only one that tries to be good and is good. The thing that we knew for sure before ever meeting Soldier Boy is he is a terrible singer. There's full clips now out on YouTube. I think there's 2 of them. Absolutely hilarious. And yet I can't make it through one of them because he just sings terribly.
That played into some of the show's humor for sure, showing Soldier Boy in all these old style ads. But yeah, Soldier Boy, Homelander, they're very similar characters, and they're just so garbage human beings. And I hate Homelander. I mean, the actor is amazing. The actor does a phenomenal job. I'm sick of him getting away with crap. There's no comeuppance for him. It's making me think of Game of Thrones. Don't ever love anything because everything you love is just going to die and it's going to be awful. That's what the show is starting to feel like a little bit. Well, we can't have nice things because Homelander sucks and there's no comeuppance, and I just am rooting for a Purple Wedding moment. Purple Wedding is when Joffrey is poisoned because his face turns purple. Homelander is basically Joffrey to me. There is absolutely nothing redeeming about him. Every humanizing moment is just me going, it sucks that this person maybe could have been an okay person in other circumstances, but he's a garbage person and deserves nothing good. When is his comeuppance? Because I'm so sick of this character. The actor is amazing. There's nothing against it. He is so good. He's so good at playing this character. You hate him with a passion. From a storytelling aspect, I just don't understand how we're still going to just play him over and over and over again. I really thought they were going to remove his powers this season with Soldier Boy's laser thing. I thought that would be really cool to keep him a part of the show next season, but to have him be depowered, I thought that would have been a really interesting twist. But we're just getting more of the same.
Right. They started this path in season 2 of having everyone being afraid of him because he is unstable. And yeah, you're right. It's just more of the same. It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And the only person who seems to be able to have any hold on him, which unfortunately is removed pretty early on, is Stan Edgar, who I hope we haven't seen the last of. I hope we haven't seen the last of him because I feel like there's some interesting things that he could still do yet. He seemed to be the only one that Homelander kind of feared or respected, maybe in a way. The continual destabilization of Homelander's psyche, especially when he finds out one of the big twists, which I didn't see coming, which is Soldier Boy being Homelander's father.
Tell you what, that didn't really hit me that hard, to be honest. I didn't necessarily see it coming because the show is just so graphic and in your face and just so disturbing. Such a simple twist. Just didn't even make a blip on the radar for me.
A lot of things clicked for me when he said that because we knew that Homelander was raised in a lab, but genetically, maybe him having some of those characteristics and being as crazy as Soldier Boy is, having those proclivities to insanity, seemed to kind of click with me.
It makes internal sense and consistency. It's just as a reveal, it just felt very vanilla compared to the stuff they normally do in this show because it's just so in your face. I'm not saying I didn't like the reveal. I'm just saying I didn't get any kind of rush of shock or surprise, or the show kind of makes me numb to such things.
With the level of debauchery on the show, that does rank among the lowest of the shock factors. I wanted to see more of Soldier Boy killing off Soups. They don't get to Soldier Boy until about halfway through the season.
Yeah, it does take a while for them to really bring Soldier Boy in. Going through episode 1, I'm like, okay, well, we saw him in some clips, a picture here or there. Episode 2 is a little bit more. I'm like, is he in the show?
Right, and it felt kind of slow moving to me up until they finally get him, and then it's quick. Then it becomes almost like killing off a soup of the week until we get to the end. When they finally started doing some missions to kill off some soups, I felt like we were finally getting back to what made the boys interesting, which was regular Joes doing crazy things and killing soups. Although this time it was regular Joes teaming up with a crazy soup to kill off soups. I kind of wished that we had seen more of that.
I always like it when they find weird ways to take out a superhero, creative ways to take them out. I think that is when it's most interesting. You know, I liked Soldier Boy. I'm done with Homelander. I want to see him either die or become depowered.
I'm wondering if they're going to pull something like Injustice did with DC. At the end of Injustice, evil Superman is captured, but he might still have a little bit of his powers. And I'm wondering if they're going to pull something off like that with Homelander. They did the same thing in the X-Men movies, where they showed Magneto potentially depowered, but also maybe has a little bit of powers left.
Sure, anything. Just he needs some comeuppance. Every time you think there's going to be comeuppance for him, people decide to follow him even harder.
Right, and you see that maybe 3 or 4 times in this season. You see Starlight makes her big announcement, and you can see in the comments of her, I don't know if it's Instagram Live or whatever, saying Starlight lies and support for Homelander. But you can see that crazy loyalist sect still following Homelander despite the news and information that's come out. And then later on, she records Homelander saying some crap to her in the Vought building. And the same thing happens again, where people continue to say, oh no, she's lying, and believing Homelander's side of things when he tries to portray her as like a child trafficker. Of course, like you said, at the end, when he kills the guy in plain view of everyone and gets cheered for it.
I think before this season, Starlight was not my favorite character, but this season, she definitely became my favorite character because I just felt like there was finally a character to root for. Somebody that we could be like, she's doing the right thing. She is not playing their game. She's not even going by Starlight anymore. She wants to be called by her real name because Starlight was just given to her as a PR move, right? And all of this is fake. All of this is, it's a big scheme for people to have power, people to have money. She kind of sheds light on these things and fights it in a different way. She's not fighting it like the boys who are just trying to blindly get revenge on everything and everyone. And she's not playing into the game of Vought. She's someone to actually root for in the show.
I thought season 2 was going to be her breaking point, but I guess, she thought she could still do good being inside, as I said before, being inside the lion's den.
I think it really played well to that moment. She gives that speech, that Mother's Milk films. I think that moment was where I was like, okay, yes, I can root for Starlight. There is somebody good in all of this.
She seems more effective to me in earlier seasons. Did it seem to you at all that they depowered her? Because, and I only really have one example of this, because again, she seemed to be pretty effective, or at least semi-effective, against Stormfront in the second season. But this season, when they're fighting Soldier Boy in the end, Hughie pumps juice into the lighting system in the newsroom, charging her powers to the point where she levitates and just blasts Soldier Boy with a massive burst of energy. But all she does is push him back, and I can't remember if she breaks his shield or not, but it didn't seem super effective, even though she was charged up even further. And it seemed to me that either they depowered her, or is she technically the weakest member of the seven?
Her power is very dependent on the electricity that's around her. And also, for story reasons, her effectiveness or anyone's effectiveness has to change depending on who they're up against, right? When she fights Stormfront, she is with Kimiko and Queen Maeve, and they're all ganging up on her. It's not like she goes just one on one. And I would say it's probably arguable that Soldier Boy is even more powerful than Stormfront. And it is one on one in that moment. And I think to a degree, yeah, it might have just been a weird editing choice that made it seem like he didn't get pushed that far. But I think it was supposed to narratively be a big hit. I would say, yeah, she probably is the weakest or close to because she's so dependent on electricity.
I think Maeve might have been my favorite character this season, followed up by Mother's Milk, but she was a strong runner up.
So then the last two characters we just haven't talked about were Hughie and Butcher. I really liked both their stories. I think Hughie is the character you've been rooting for in previous seasons because he's just so innocent. And some of that innocence is taken from him. He's had so much crappy things happen to him. And he's been under this pressure for so long, and he's finally snapping to a degree. And he's kind of had to deal with that feeling of powerlessness. And he has a way to fight that. And he's realizing maybe I shouldn't be taking this easy path. And it turns out he definitely shouldn't because that will 100% kill him.
I think he starts out with his motivations, especially being a part of the FBI agency to hold Soups accountable. He starts off with good motivations that, yeah, he wants to protect those he cares about, those he loves. And I think he does start out with the motivation of wanting to protect Annie. And he talks about that early on when they're having their breakfast moments together and he's struggling to take off the lid on the jar. And he has those moments of explaining that, which I thought they established pretty well, was that, yeah, he does want to protect her and he thinks he's doing it the right way. He finds out about Soldier Boy and an option to take out Homelander, which they've been working for the entire show. And then he finds out that his boss, like you said earlier, is the person from season 2 who popped all of Congress's heads. And he starts to find out just a tiny bit more about her past. He finds out all these things, and I think it drives him to take the temporary V because he sees that as the only way to level the playing field and achieve his goal as protecting Annie. But then, like any junkie, he becomes addicted. I think it's less about being addicted to the V and more about not feeling powerless anymore because he is, as Maeve makes fun of him, he is kind of a twink. He is weak, or like she says, he is a bottom. Although he does have some good moments in the previous seasons, but he is that and he knows that and he starts to become addicted to finally having some power for once. And I think that's when he starts to lose sight of his motivations. And it's so cool to see the roles of the hero and their grounding person kind of reversed, because Hughie should be the grounding person for Starlight, who is the hero, but they kind of flip roles a little bit, and Starlight has to be the grounding for Hughie as he's kind of going off this deep end. And that's cool to see. Their relationship is so interesting.
I definitely read it a little differently than you with Huey's motivations. I feel as though his constant abuse and fear that he has received either from Homelander, A Train before it, many other supers, and then feeling like he finally has a way to fight back and a right way, not just blind revenge and murdering all these soups like the boys were doing previously, but finding a good way to hold those supers accountable and then realizing it's all a lie. I think it was just even more emasculating, even more abuse piled onto him. And I never read him taking V as a way to protect Starlight. I think that's what he told himself, but I never understood it that way. I always understood it as he is trying to gain power and be something he's not.
No, I think him working with the FBI and trying to do things the right way, I think that was motivated by him trying to help in a way to protect Starlight.
Oh, yeah, okay, that, yeah.
But once the temporary V was introduced and Butcher's negative influence, I think that's when he started to see an avenue to not be weak anymore. And that's what started that kind of addiction to power that eventually Starlight tried to drag him out of. I didn't mean that him taking the V started as being motivated by him protecting Starlight, because I agree with you. I think that he was fooling himself by saying that.
But yeah, I really thought it was an interesting story. And even though he kind of ends up, I agree, he kind of ends up where he started to a degree. I think it was a worthwhile journey in his case.
I think he might finally be on the same page as Annie January and Mother's Milk, in the sense that there needs to be some moral line that they don't cross. Because if they don't do it the right way, what's the point of doing it?
Yeah, they just become what they're fighting against. Speaking of which, Butcher. Butcher has never been the good guy. I've never once read him as the good guy. But what really played into his story that I really enjoyed, right? Because he's struggling with this V24. He's getting all these powers and using it to kill supers, and he's getting kind of the revenge he always wanted. But I really liked the insight into his history, the insight into his relationship with his brother, and now how Hughie plays that role in his life. And in the end, Butcher also makes the right calls. He has been blinded by revenge and hate for so long. And I feel like that moment where he has his revenge insight on Homelander, he can ensure Homelander is finished by teaming up with Soldier Boy in the end. But he stops and he does it to protect Ryan. I think Hughie plays a major role in that.
As they've really truly established in season 2, Hughie and Mother's Milk, I think, are his canaries. They try and keep him sane, which is no small feat in regards to Butcher. But he definitely goes off the deep end this season, and I think it's because he does get a taste of power himself. My main qualm with Butcher this season is that it feels almost like more of the same. We already know he's an anti-hero. We already know he's pretty crappy. So it doesn't shock me when Annie tells him that the V24 could be killing him and Hughie, that he doesn't stop taking himself and doesn't tell Hughie right away. So that doesn't shock me at all. Him teaming up with Soldier Boy, that didn't shock me either, because he had already been teaming up with Maeve, so he had kind of already done away with his qualm of working with soups against soups. While they did give us some flashbacks in regards to what happened with his brother, I felt like we kind of already knew a lot about that from season 2 when he meets up with his dad who's dying and talks with his mother. I feel like we got most of that there. And so that was the main reason why I say I feel that some of the characters their arcs turned into more of a circular story or even an arc with a U-turn, because I feel like they took one step forward and then two steps back in the storytelling and maybe ended up right where they had left off as they were in the beginning of the season. Butcher kind of lost his way for a little while, and then it seems like at the end of the season, he has a similar drive as he had in the beginning of this season, where, okay, you know what? Enough with these soups. Let's get back to business, taking out soups like we normally do and setting his sights on Newman. Oh, another thing that didn't surprise me about him was when he went off on Ryan instead of just explaining to him why he was trying to keep him safe. Because Ryan at this point looks like he's a preteen or a teenager. And I feel like he could have explained it a little better to him instead of just kind of.
Sure, of course he could have explained it better, but I mean, Butcher is an idiot. He's not the hero. It has never been established that he does right things or good things.
But for someone who's good at manipulating people, he's good at manipulating the boys into doing what he wants them to do. But it's interesting to me how he just kind of fails when it comes to Ryan, which I get it. There is a lot of emotion there. Ryan killed his wife, and Ryan is pretty much the bastard child of Homelander and Becca. And so, yeah, I guess it's got to hurt seeing that kid. But he also does have a little bit of a soft spot for him, which they reveal in the beginning.
Yeah, and it plays in the end too.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I'll be interested to see where the show goes. I want to see something very new and very different, and I'm hoping that they don't do quite as much of the graphic stuff without Just Cause. I know they're going to do it, but give it a little bit more story meaning. I'd be okay with the next one being the last one.
The way they left off this season has me thinking that next one might be their last, with Butcher having taken so much temporary V that they tell him at the end of the season he has 18 months to live. Because honestly, this season I was on the fence about watching it, and if they're going to go even crazier for next season, if it's not going to be the last, I don't know if I'm going to watch it. I gotta be honest. I'm not sure if it's for me, if they're going to keep going off the deep end and not have it be the culmination of the story. Because I feel like this season could have been the culmination of that. But then the last episode, while it had some really good moments for me, it did seem like they jumped the shark a little bit.
There are storylines that I feel like it's time to start resolving that they haven't. So I'm really hoping next season we get that.
I'm glad they didn't do this in the show, but at the same time, I'm kind of wishing that they did because it would have made for interesting TV to me. In the comics, Butcher confronts Homelander in the White House, and Noir shows up. And in the comics, Butcher's wife was killed by Homelander. There's photographic evidence and all that kind of stuff. And so while Butcher confronts Homelander, Noir shows up and reveals himself to be a clone of Homelander and reveals that he was.
I mean, you can pretty much guarantee that's not how they're playing it in the show. In the flashback, they show Black Noir without his mask. He literally is a black man.
No, I know. When I first learned of this, I was like, I thought to myself, this could be a really interesting avenue for them to go. But in the comics, Noir is a clone of Homelander. He can kill Homelander if he goes crazy and replace him. And so he is Vought's failsafe for that. But he reveals himself to have actually framed Homelander for all these terrible things that he's done, or at least some of the terrible things that he's done, and starting him on this cascade of insanity. Butcher watches while those two fight, and the clone does eventually end up killing the original Homelander, but not without taking heavy damage to himself, which then Butcher kills him. And that's kind of how that storyline ends in the comics. And I thought elements of that would have been very interesting to see, but I am also glad that they did not go that route.
Overall, there are a lot of things I like about it. I think it's very well written. It's very well produced. There's a lot of characters that I really like, but there's also a lot that I just am a little sick of.
I guess we have yet to see if we're going to watch the next. Honestly, I feel like if it's not going to be the last season, I will have very little motivation to watch it.
I am interested to see where it goes. I'm hoping that they do something a little new with season 4. I think the writing is really good. It's a little too much for me at times. And I think that's a personal preference thing. I understand a lot of people really, really love this season and really, really love this show, but it's just a little much for me.
Next time, I think we're going to be covering Miss Marvel, the Disney Plus Marvel TV show. A little bit different than what I'm used to with Marvel fare.
Definitely a different conversation than The Boys.
Oh, way different. That's all for today's episode. Please subscribe, follow, and leave a review on whatever podcasting medium you use. And please check out our YouTube channel for additional content. Join us next week, and thank you for listening to Age of the Geek.